now former Vice President Mike Pence. He's the founder of Advancing American Freedom. It's been a while. You're joining us on set, Mr. Veep. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back.
We'll get this on, covering like it's S&P.
Usually it's me in a chart.
It's you in a chart. All right. Well, we've got a living, breathing vice president here, which is good. So we will get into some other things eventually. But off camera, you were just talking about you've met President Xi, spent some time with him. I was kidding. I said, have you looked into his eyes and seen his soul? And referencing, I guess that was W talking about Putin.
It was.
If you recall. Is he our friend? Is he a frenemy? Is he? What's happening with
China is the greatest economic and strategic threat facing the United States of America in the 21st century. And under our administration, we stood strong on China. Meaning we made historic investments in the military in the Asia-Pacific. That continues now under the second Trump administration. But we also used tariffs to bring China to the table. My hope is, in the president's dialogue with President Xi today, that he makes it clear that we're going to continue to stand firm, stand up to China's trade abuses, intellectual property theft, its military provocations, and TikTok is a very real issue. Under our administration, the CFIUS committee unanimously recommended that TikTok be banned or sold to an American interest because it threatens the privacy and security of the American people. That's still true. Congress, in a broad bipartisan way, passed a measure to achieve that. I think Secretary Bessent and the administration owe the American people some real detail on the framework of the TikTok agreement that's been reached. We just simply can't have China continuing to own or operate any aspect of TikTok in the national interest.
We've tried to read between the lines that she eventually decided that maybe they do let the algorithm that's so near and dear that was never going to be, let into foreign hands, that they will let that happen. They moved on to Nvidia as a bargaining chip, and to make it look tough to their own population, make them look tough
in the eyes of their own.
Yeah, the Nvidia piece.
Right.
But do you believe that they really have capitulated on control of
Joe, you got to
TikTok?
remember, the algorithm for TikTok is banned in China because it's so highly addictive and it's so capable for propaganda. I just think it's inconsistent with our national security, and I think the administration has to stand firm and tell China you have to release and let go of the algorithm entirely. If that doesn't happen, it should be banned, and I'm sure the marketplace will fill in for it.
You mentioned that in your administration, you used tariffs to bring China to the table.
We did.
If this is what's going on now, bringing Xi to the table, what's the objective of that? Is it just to frame the terms of kind of further disengagement or some kind of a standoff? Because it doesn't seem as if, they're kind of doing their own parallel AI investments because they don't necessarily want to be dependent on the U.S. We have U.S. companies who want to be able to be the global standard for things like that. Yeah. So what are we aiming for?
Well, I think that's a real question. In our administration, it was about lowering tariffs and non-tariff barriers. This administration seems to be pursuing an industrial policy that includes permanent, across-the-board tariffs on friend and foe alike, which I believe is inconsistent with pro-growth policies in the United States. And we've been challenging it, and now it's before the Supreme Court. But, Joe, it's the first time I've been back at the table here since last week's tragic events. And, the Bible says we mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. And I just have to tell you, I knew Charlie Kirk. He's a good and godly man, devoted husband, father, important voice in America. I'm heartsick about what happened to him, and I truly do pray for his family, commend law enforcement, the community, and but you understand the anger in this moment. It's understandable, but I think we got to be careful about putting America on trial whenever we see evil overtake the hearts of any individual. And in this case, absent additional facts, there was one person responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination. He needs to be brought to justice, swift and certain. Can people in public life do better in the way that we speak with one another and about the issues facing the country? Of course. I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. But Charlie Kirk was a champion of the First Amendment, a champion of free and open debate. He ultimately died defending it. And I think on that principle, we should stand and ensure that it's part of his legacy.
It goes beyond one deranged individual, though. This week, and that was last week, this week, I guess prosecutors dropped some charges against Mangione, and there were more than one person outside that courtroom cheering that decision. And we, I don't know, it was United Healthcare, but the outrage when that happened, and for people that were celebrating it, it wasn't sufficient, obviously, to let people know this is unacceptable. And that let...
Well, Joe, you're absolutely right. Political violence should be universally condemned. And while we've seen it in both directions, I remember the congressional baseball game, a man inspired by what he saw on another network, and follower of Bernie Sanders, the Mangione who attacked a healthcare executive, ridden, I guess,
Minnesota
leftist, and then they attacked the assassination attempts on President Trump. And Charlie Kirk's heinous assassination. As you said on the show the other day, the bullets are going both ways, but I am very troubled about the fact that the left seems much more willing to celebrate and even accept political violence. And I think we need to call on leaders on the left to denounce that. To see people cheering outside the courthouse when charges were dropped, terrorism charges were dropped against Mangione is deeply offensive and should be offensive to every American. To see people cheering the death of a good and decent man like Charlie Kirk should be unacceptable to every American, and we ought to speak that way.
This brings up other things. You're from Indiana. Obviously, I'm from Cincinnati. Nexstar owns quite a few affiliates of ABC in Indiana, and this was not playing the Jimmy Kimmel comments that he made. Wasn't playing well in the heartland, at least. But the FCC did weigh in, obviously, on licenses and everything else. So now you've got, people on both sides saying, look, this is back to cancel culture. Now the Republicans own cancel culture, and now they're going after free speech. Was he canceled because of pressure from the government, or was he canceled because of an uprising with people in the center of the country like Indiana?
Well, look, it's important to say that the First Amendment doesn't protect entertainers from being fired by their employers.
But if the FCC comes in and puts pressure and says you're going to lose your license.
I would have preferred that the FCC didn't weigh in the wake of this. But look, the First Amendment protects against government action against individuals that would infringe on speech. I want to say again, with great respect and admiration, that Charlie Kirk died defending that principle. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't be held accountable for absurd and things that they say and or the way they demean or celebrate violence against our fellow countrymen. And Jimmy Kimmel said an awful lot of negative things about me, an awful lot of untrue things about me. But I think it's clear to me, his employers saw that he crossed a line by demeaning this true national tragedy, and he answered for it. And that's how the private marketplace works.
Well, I mean, you can certainly condemn individuals who are celebrating such a thing as the murder of somebody, but that doesn't mean you have to perceive that there's a network, an organized movement that's behind it. I mean, there are individuals who say objectionable things all the time, but now we have the government trying to form some kind of approach, it seems, to go after what they're characterizing as some kind of network that's fomenting this type of activity. I mean, it's just difficult to see that not being, the government infringing on some kind of speech or using it as a pretext
Mike,
for something else.
Mike, I think it's the right question. But look, I remember all those riots in the summer of 2020 in the wake of George Floyd's murder.
They're mostly peaceful ones.
Sure. But No, it was in about 50 cities.
No, when it was called mostly peaceful by the correspondent
burning out business.
You know how many people got arrested?
But in those situations, Mike,
people got arrested.
I am telling you that in those riots, there were supplies that were delivered that we never got the right answer to. Who was delivering bricks to be thrown through the windows of storekeepers in Minnesota? Who was delivering the crowbars and hatchets that people use? So I think those are very legitimate. If there are organizations, interests, or resources that are supporting anarchy in this country, I think they need to answer for that. But I take your point. I really do believe that we should follow the facts. And I think we need to resist putting America on trial every time evil claims the heart of someone and they do violence against one of our countrymen. And I think now is the time for us to look inward. I think we ought to recognize we don't have a political problem in this country. We have a moral problem in this country. And we ought to turn our hearts back to God, and this coming weekend, every American ought to be praying for that precious family.
Nvidia investing did you see this?
No.
Nvidia Intel to jointly develop multi-generation, of custom data centers. Nvidia will invest $5 billion into Intel at $23.28 a share. Will focus on seamlessly connecting architectures using Nvidia NVLink. I'm glad Intel can still provide some, after we gave them all that money. I was going to ask you about that, Mike. Were you for the CHIPS Act? You think that was good? And you mentioned the tariff regimen might not be your cup of tea. What about, so the way I justify it, we were given these grants under this CHIPS Act, which dictated union wages and child care and DEI and all this stuff, everything that was wrong with the Biden administration. Is it okay to get a 10% stake, or is that industrial policy for this administration?
State ownership of business is very common in China.
This is passive, but this is passive.
In Russia?
Yeah.
Taking a percentage of the sales of Nvidia, a percentage of the stock.
You don't like any of it?
Intel is inconsistent with free market principles, and I think it's taken our country to a very perilous place, and I think we need to resist that very strongly. The Constitution is clear. We have a takings clause. There has to be just compensation. There was nothing in the CHIPS Act that required a percentage of sales. And I really do believe that what's happening with tariffs, what's happening with state ownership of business represents a departure from the free market principles that have been at the heart of the Republican Party. And for the sake of our long-term prosperity, we need to get back to those principles.
I mean, when you read that NVIDIA, we know the government is involved with Intel. We know the government's involved with NVIDIA. Are there some
tacitly, if not actively,
fingerprints here?
Intel has been anointed as an indispensable
domestic producer
domestically.
Security.
It's going to be the instrument under which we try to get $5 billion to NVIDIA is, they got it under the couch cushions. I'm sure there's something useful that they're going to do in tandem, and it probably helps to just keep diversifying your partners if you're Nvidia. So maybe it works all around.
Jensen's over there.
The problem you got, guys, when the government takes a stake, and you've seen this in socialist countries everywhere. Right. There are companies that are too big to fail.
They're propped up,
and the rest of the businesses are too small to care about. And we believe in a refereed private sector. I believe in limited government. And I think I would urge a caution on the move into state ownership of business, however well-intentioned. And Joe, I know the president better.
When's the last time you spoke to President Trump, Mike?
I think having people around him that remind him what will sustain long-term growth.
Do you speak to him?
That's not state-owned businesses.
Do you speak to him? When's the last time you spoke to him? You could tell me.
We spoke right after the first of the year.
After the first of the year.
We don't talk as often as we used to, Joe, but I get the impression he still listens to me. And so we've tried to be a constructive voice. We strongly supported the renewal of the Trump tax cuts. I heard your previous guest say that in the midst of this avalanche of Liberation Day tariffs, that it's probably been renewing the tax cuts that's sustained
some of the other
economy
things,
and kept our momentum. But we're gonna continue to call balls and strikes, and I pray for the president, and I hope for every success for him and for America.
All right, Mr. Vice President, thank you for being here. You know what?